"What's a poor guy like you doing in this place? You don't belong here, so you'd better leave right away. You're causing trouble for the place." And anyone with half a mind could see that. As soon as he spotted me, Horatio, my former boss from the IT company, walked right over with the same blunt tone he always used. I couldn't stop shaking, and all I could do was stare at him, unable to say a single word back. Then my wife Nicola, who was sitting next to me, stood up slowly. "My name is Stanford. After graduating from college, I managed to get a job in an IT company and was assigned to the customer support department. My main role was to handle calls from customers using the company's systems and respond to questions via email. My supervisor, Horatio, was strict but taught me the ropes carefully, and I always aspired to treat customers with the same care that Horatio did. Even though I had a job, the economy was tough, and my paycheck was modest, so I made ends meet by budgeting carefully. Several years passed after I finally became independent, and I proposed to Nicola, my girlfriend since college. I first met Nicola when she suddenly spoke to me on campus. No woman had ever approached me before, so I was nervous as I replied, "Your button is coming loose." She smiled softly, then took out a small sewing kit and fixed the button on my sleeve. I was moved by her graceful skill, but even more, I was drawn to how Nicola treated everyone with the same kindness. From then on, we started greeting each other when we passed on campus, and soon it felt natural to spend time together. So I made my one and only confession of love. Nicola blushed and smiled, happily accepting my clumsy confession. After graduation, we each moved to the city and started living on our own. Nicola had received offers from companies with better conditions, but she chose to work at a small shop that does clothing alterations and repairs. Just like me, her salary wasn't much, so she lives frugally, but Nicola seems to enjoy even that, proudly sharing her money-saving tips with me. Seeing Nicola embrace the work she chose for herself always gave me strength. I may not have much money, but I promise to work hard for you, Nicola. Life may be tough for a while, but I still want to be with you. Will you marry me? As long as I'm with you, Stanford, I'm sure life will be fun even without money. Of course, I'm not saying we have to stay poor forever. What matters most to me is being together and the happiness that brings. Does it make sense? Anyways, I know I have my flaws, but I hope we can live happily ever after." Nicola smiled gently and squeezed my hand. Instead of an engagement ring, I gave Nicola a new sewing kit. She had been saying she wanted one every time we met. I worried it was tacky to choose something so much cheaper than a ring, but her bright smile melted those concerns away. Nicola started carrying what she called her engagement sewing kit with her everywhere. Even after we started living together in our small, cramped room, seeing her use that sewing kit to mend her own clothes brought a warm feeling to my heart. But despite that happiness, as expected, even combining our earnings wasn't enough to make life easy. Still, Nicola would say, "You know, appearances matter in an office job, right? Don't hesitate to get yourself a new dress shirt." She'd smile and add, "I'm free to wear whatever I want. And besides, the apron covers everything anyway." I knew that most of her clothes were ones she had mended or remade herself. "If you're not going to buy yourself any new clothes, Nicola, then I won't either. I work behind the scenes too, so it's no big deal. But if I start looking too shabby, would you use those amazing sewing skills of yours to fix me up?" When I said that, "Got it," Nicola just beamed and replied. And so our married life began, poor yet full of joy. One day, after I'd finished handling customer calls as usual, I got summoned to the conference room by Horatio. "Stanford, do you realize that the more time you spend with each customer, the more other tasks have to be shifted to other employees? You just get married, right? Maybe it's time you start paying attention to your surroundings so you don't make any enemies, huh? Wouldn't want to be stuck in this pool life forever, would you? Look at reality, will ya?" His words snapped me back to reality. I had tried to approach customers with the same empathy as Horatio, but my lack of experience meant that my efforts just ended up creating more work for others to clean up. If I wanted to get ahead in this company and earn more, I had to find a way to get along with my coworkers as well. Horatio wasn't wrong, but his condescending tone left a stain in my chest. So I tried to follow Horatio's advice, trying to fit in and play things smart. But I struggled with social interactions, and even though I knew I needed to change my work style, my own awkwardness made it hard to break out of old habits. Before I knew it, I found myself isolated, with whispers and rumors behind my back. Horatio's attitude also grew colder and more cutting. "Did you forget what I told you? You and your wife, planning to stay poor forever," he would say, throwing words that pierced straight through me. After days like that, I'd return home utterly drained, and Nicola, who'd finished her work earlier, would always have dinner ready to greet me. No matter how late it got, she'd wait with a smile, determined that we would at least share a meal together. Even though I knew I needed to change for the sake of the person I loved most, the struggle at work wore me down, draining me bit by bit. One day, as soon as I arrived at work, Horatio called me. I figured it was going to be yet another lecture, the kind where I'd want to yell, "I know already." But instead, he took me not to the conference room, but to the CEO's office. Following Horatio inside, I saw not only the CEO, but also a few other executives. They averted their gaze awkwardly as soon as they saw me. Sensing the strange tension in the air, I turned to Horatio, about to ask what was going on, when the voice of the company president, sitting directly across from us, filled the room. "Starting tomorrow, don't come to the office." That's what he said for certain. I knew the company hadn't been doing well financially for the past few years, but I never imagined that I'd be the one targeted for downsizing. I glanced at Horatio in a panic, but he wouldn't even look my way anymore. And just like that, I was given a token severance, forced to leave the company. "Thank you for everything," I said, addressing my team as I bid farewell, though no one would look at me. I couldn't keep this from Nicola, so, struggling to find the words, I told her I'd been let go. "Oh, I see," Nicola simply muttered. I braced myself, half expecting her to bring up the idea of divorce right then and there. "Okay then, Stanford, this is your time to recharge. You've been working so hard, looking so strained since we got married. I've noticed, you know. Since you've put in so much effort, I'll handle things for a while, so take a good rest." Hearing her words, I buried my face in her chest and cried like a child. Nicola just smiled gently, softly patting my back, letting me pour out my emotions. For the next little while, Nicola worked long hours, while I took care of the house as best I could. But I knew I couldn't rely on her forever. So after consulting with Nicola, I decided to start working part-time at a small, family-owned restaurant within walking distance of our home. Recalling the skills I'd picked up from working in a restaurant back in college, I often took shifts during the busy lunch hours. The manager expressed gratitude, saying I was a great asset, and even the younger part-timers complimented my efficiency, asking me to teach them some tricks. Slowly, I began to regain my confidence in working again. One day, while I was enjoying my work, I noticed the manager, sighing deeply as he carried out a trash bag. Curious, I asked him what was inside, and he sighed again, telling me it was food he'd ordered for the week but ended up spoiling. He explained, with a wry smile, that this was common ordering enough for expected customer turnout, only to have it go to waste, making the expense a loss. Intrigued, I asked the manager for details about his regular food suppliers and started learning about how food distribution worked. Nicola and I often discussed the things I found interesting, and I began wondering if there was a way to solve this problem. One day, after some time had passed, I said to Nicola when she got home from work, "I have something to talk about." With a smile, "That's your face when you've thought of something fun," she responded. Several years have passed since then, and with some free time on our hands, Nicola and I have come to a steakhouse together. We had planned to celebrate our anniversary in a grand way, but both of us were a little on edge, having never been to this steakhouse before. The warm-hearted chef greeted us when we confirmed our reservation, leading us to our seats. Even the way he cheerfully took our order made my heart race a bit. Sitting with Nicola, "This is exciting, isn't it?" We chatted while we waited, until we heard the door swing open. I glanced toward it, and there stood none other than my former boss, Horatio. Horatio came right up to me as soon as he spotted me, speaking in that same old dismissive tone. "What's a poor guy like you doing in this place? You don't belong here, so you might as well go home. You're just getting in the way here." And honestly, a little thought would have made that obvious. In that instant, I was flooded with memories of those days when I used to work under Horatio, and he would belittle me until, finally, he just tossed me aside. My breath grew ragged as the memories surfaced. I couldn't stop my body from trembling, and all I could do was stare back at Horatio, unable to say a word in response. Then, out of the blue, Nicola, who had been sitting next to me, stood up calmly. "Excuse me for just a moment," she said, with a gentle smile. While Horatio looked on in confusion, she pulled out a sewing kit from her bag and quickly reattached a button on the frayed cuff of his shirt. "There, it looks neat now," Nicola said with a smile. "You mocking me?" Horatio snarled, as if ready to grab her by the arm. "Well, now that was a clever move." A voice came from the back of the shop. Horatio turned around in surprise to see a man leisurely walking towards us, chuckling in amusement. "Corey!" Horatio shouted. "I didn't realize you were here today," he mumbled, looking down sheepishly. Corey let out a big sigh as he watched Horatio. "Poor guy this, poor guy that. Funny how you're all high and mighty now, even though you were in the same boat just a little while back. Look, she wasn't mocking you. She was just being kind. And here you are, getting all worked up over it. From what I saw, you've been coming around here every week, needing advice about this fellow here. I warned you to think about how you communicate. Seems you haven't grown an inch." Normally quick-witted at work, Horatio was at a loss for words against Corey. Then Corey turned to me and Nicola. "I'm here to greet the president of the company that's been so helpful to us," he said with a sly grin directed at Horatio. "What?" Horatio murmured, frozen in shock, as I stepped forward and handed him my business card. As it turns out, after leaving my previous job, I started my own logistics service for small, independent restaurants. Using technology, we directly connect restaurants with markets, allowing them to buy only the fresh ingredients they need when they need them. While it may not suit chain restaurants, we're becoming well known among restaurant owners who want to avoid food waste or who just want the flexibility to buy only what they need. Corey was one of the first to support our approach, and when I pitched our services to him in person, He told me he was grateful to be able to buy only the seasonal meat he needed. Thanks to this man here, we no longer have to buy an entire lot of seasonal meat just to get a few good cuts. I want my customers to enjoy the best of what's in season. And with meat, you just don't get a chance to wait. This company even sells by the gram. It's quite something. So tell me, are you still going to call this man here poor? Watching Corey's amused expression, Horatio flushed with embarrassment and plopped down heavily in the seat next to me. From there, Corey decided to treat us to steaks, cooking up a fresh batch of seasonal meat that had just arrived thanks to our company's system. The steak was so expertly prepared that it was almost enough to make me tear up. According to Corey, Horatio, who had been working in that same company for years, had also struggled financially in his younger days. One day, he noticed Horatio standing still in front of the restaurant before it opened. "I'll treat you to a good meal," he said with a grin. The steak he ate that day brought tears to Horatio's eyes as he savored every bite. "Someday I'll come back here with money I've earned myself," he vowed passionately. When Horatio finally returned to the restaurant, as he had promised, the sight of him nearly brought Corey to tears. Over the years, even after Corey handed over the restaurant to his apprentice Line, Horatio would stop by often to vent about his job. And as it turns out, those complaints were all about me. Apparently, Horatio had assumed that, like him in his younger days, I was struggling and barely scraping by. Getting married and having a family was my choice, but as someone who now had responsibilities, Horatio couldn't help but get frustrated seeing me continue with my own reckless way of working. Horatio figured that if I kept going like this, it was only a matter of time before I'd be let go. And as it turned out, he had done everything he could to help me keep my position at the company. But in the end, it hadn't worked out. Listening to Corey, I finally realized that every harsh word Horatio had ever thrown at me was actually a clumsy expression of concern. "It's hard to tell, you know," I blurted out. "Shut up," Horatio shot back with equal intensity, which made Corey chuckle. "I couldn't keep you on. That was my own failure." That frustration drove me to try and change this department. Now I'm the manager of the customer support team. I oversee task assignments and settle disputes between colleagues. My workload has grown, but it's fulfilling. Though it's odd for me to say, I'm glad to see you're doing well and enjoying your job now. With a little cough, Horatio raised his glass of wine calmly. When I hurriedly lifted my own, Horatio poured the wine slowly. "To your bright future," he murmured as he toasted. Seeing him down the wine in one gulp brought tears streaming down my cheeks. Even after all that, I kept in touch with Horatio, and occasionally we'd meet up with Corey at that same steakhouse to enjoy each other's company. One day, just like before, Nicola noticed a loose button on Horatio's shirt sleeve and quietly reattached it. "Thanks," Horatio murmured with an awkward smile. Hearing him say that, Nicola and I exchanged glances and burst out laughing. "What's so funny?" Horatio demanded, his face turning bright red. Watching us, Corey couldn't help but comment, "Quite the lively bunch," he said with a pleased smile as he tended to the steaks. "When I was 6 years old, my parents died in a car accident. My mother's sister, Anne, took me in, and I grew up under her care in a small rural town, helping her tend a little garden. Grieving and unwilling to venture outside, Anne was patient, quietly supporting me and tending to my needs. Though we lived humbly, it was thanks to Anne's bright, kind spirit that I was able to grow up well. We couldn't afford any toys, but I was content with just paper and colored pencils. I loved to draw more than anything. Scenes of the countryside, sunsets over the ocean, and the vast, starry sky. Though I had no shortage of subjects, it was Anne's face I enjoyed painting most. I never grew tired of drawing Anne, day in and day out. "Sean, you're really talented at this. I'm so happy to be painted by such a skilled artist. When I grow up, do you think I can be a painter?" "Absolutely. You'll become the best artist in America." Anne's words ran like magic, and eventually, I began dreaming of becoming a painter myself. But in the summer of my junior year of high school, at 17, Anne passed away. She was gone just 6 months after she was admitted to the hospital. I had intended to go to art school, but due to financial circumstances, I decided to get a job instead. I wanted to work to make life easier for her, but she was gone so quickly. Holding back tears, I went through her belongings. In one of the boxes, I found dozens of my drawings, carefully stored away. And the tears started flowing again. At the bottom of the box, I found a bank book. The account was in my name. Opening it, I was shocked to see $20,000. $20,000. When did this happen? As I picked up the bank book, a handwritten note from Anne fell out. "To Sean, go to college. That's my final wish." Finally, I broke down, crying uncontrollably. How many years had she been saving up for me? "Thank you. I'm so sorry, Anne." I clutched the bank book and continued to cry. Thanks to Anne, I was able to go to art school in the city. Living alone in a small apartment, between scholarships and the funds Anne left, I had enough for tuition, but I had to earn my own living expenses. I searched for a well-paying night job and began working at a bar. Growing up poor in the countryside, I was naturally the target of some teasing from my coworkers, struggling even to memorize cocktail names. But I enjoyed discovering this new world. "Hey, lady, stop taking stuff without permission." I heard the manager's voice coming from the alley behind the bar. I saw an old woman who came by every day to pick up empty cans from the bar's dumpster. Her name was Adele. "You're just throwing them out, right? What's the harm? Having homeless people like you lurking around every night is a nuisance." "Who are you calling homeless, kid? Don't get all high and mighty." "What did you say?" Quickly, I stepped in between them. "Well, hey, it's fine, right, boss? Just think of her as a recycling service." With a loud sigh, the manager went back inside. Relieved, I turned to the old woman. "What if he hit you? You know, words can get you in trouble." "Oh, so you know a thing or two, even as a young one." She was a sharp one, I thought, as I helped her fill the bag with cans. "From now on, I'll leave the cans in one spot for you each night, so you can grab them quietly." Adele looked at me, surprised, and said, "You're rare, a kind young man." When she smiled, she looked so much like Anne that it made my heart ache with nostalgia. From that night on, we began chatting every evening. The manager wasn't thrilled, but he let it slide because I was one of the few willing to work late shifts. Soon, she began timing her visits with my breaks. My coworkers teased me. "Sean, you've got some odd tastes. Is she your type or something?" They laughed, but talking to this old woman warmed my heart, reminding me of my grandmother. When I handed her a cup of coffee, she'd take it with her wrinkled hands, cupping it carefully, blowing on it as if it were precious. She was just like my grandma in those moments. "So are you planning to become an artist someday?" One day, while sharing parts of my background with Adele, she looked at me and asked that question. "I want to, but I don't know. Just having a college degree makes it tough." "What do you mean? Everyone studies abroad, you know. I don't have that kind of money. At most, I might be able to teach art." "Why give up before you've even tried?" she said firmly. And I laughed. "You're right. Right now, I'm working on a painting for an art exhibit. If a sponsor picks me up, my dream might just come true. Well then, go for it. You've got a good heart, and God's looking out for people like you. When she called me a good kid like I was a child, it was strangely endearing. Since my break was over, I waved goodbye to her and headed back inside. Back then, every spare moment outside of classes and work was spent painting. I was drawing my grandma in a familiar countryside setting, but as time went on, it started to resemble this old lady picking up cans more and more. It couldn't be helped if reality took precedence over memory, but it didn't bother me. In the unfamiliar city of New York, my heart felt at ease only when I was talking to Adele. After 3 months, my painting was finally done, and the exhibit was a success. I went to work that day with a light heart. Friday nights were especially busy, and I finally managed to get a break. Stepping out the back door into the alley as usual, I saw Adele sitting on the ground. "What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" I crouched down to look at her, and she was pale, clutching her chest. "Are you in pain? Are you okay?" When I held her shoulders, she let out a groan, and collapsed against me. "Manager, call an ambulance," I shouted back through the door, and the manager stuck his head out with an annoyed look. "What the hell? Just leave her be," he said. I snapped. "What the hell are you saying?" Ignoring him, I lifted Adele onto my back and started running. I could hear my manager yelling, but I didn't care. There should be a big hospital near here. With legs strengthened from growing up in the countryside, I ran at full speed. When I rushed into the hospital with Adele on my back, a nurse ran over. They quickly put her on a stretcher and took her into the treatment room. Relieved, I sank into a chair in the waiting area. Sweat poured down, and the feeling of my shirt sticking to my back was unpleasant. As I sat there for a while, someone who looked like a receptionist came up to me. "Are you a family member?" she asked, and I shook my head. "No, just an acquaintance." "I see. Then we'll get in touch with her family." She gave me a small smile and a nod, then returned to the counter. A growing sense of unease filled my chest. I doubted that someone like Adele, picking up cans to get by, had any family. In that case, who's going to cover her medical bills? I didn't even bring my wallet. I fought to head back to get my wallet, and stood up. Just then, a nurse came out from the treatment room. How is Adele?" "She's fine. It seems to be just a minor attack, and she's resting now with an 4 drip. Thank goodness." A sigh of relief escaped me, filled with genuine reassurance. When I mentioned going back to get my wallet, "There's no need for that," the nurse interrupted. "The family has been contacted, and her son should be here any moment." "Wait, really?" I was taken aback. I had assumed she didn't have any family. If her son was coming, she would be fine. With that thought, I decided not to disturb the sleeping old woman and headed back to the bar. Soon after, I lost my job. Not surprising, really. I had begged the furious manager repeatedly for forgiveness, but he wasn't having it, and now I was looking for a new job. Since being fired, I hadn't seen Adele, not even once. I thought of sneaking around the alley by the back door to catch a glimpse of her, but finding a job had to be my top priority. After all, my livelihood depended on it. I scoured online job listings but struggled to find anything suitable. 2 weeks passed since I was kicked out of the bar. One day after class, while I was packing up to leave, I heard my professor calling for me from the hallway entrance, his voice booming with excitement. Curious, I approached him. "Sean, this is incredible." My professor, usually so stern, clapped me on the back repeatedly, his excitement barely contained. "What's going on?" It was almost unsettling to see such a big smile on his usually strict face. "The painting you submitted to the exhibition has been sold, and the buyer is none other than a well-known company chairman." "Wait, what?" I was stunned. The buyer was from one of the largest corporations. I could hardly believe someone of such stature had bought my work. "And the purchase price?" $100,000. The professor lowered his voice as he shared the price. I felt like I was about to faint. "They want to meet you, Sean. They contacted the university to arrange it. You're to visit the company headquarters next Sunday." "Ray, really? Congratulations, Sean. You did it." The professor was nearly in tears with pride, but I still couldn't fully process it. This must be a dream, or maybe a miracle, but I couldn't believe it was real. When the day finally arrived, I dressed up in my best suit and made my way to the company headquarters. As I gazed up at the enormous, open ceiling, an elegant woman, almost like a movie star, appeared to escort me to the chairman's office on the top floor. "Please, go right in." Swallowing nervously, I stepped into the room. There, on a luxurious sofa, sat an elderly woman and a man in his 50s. As I approached, I noticed my painting on the marble table between them. The woman slowly rose to her feet, looking at me. "You." I pointed at her without thinking. The beaming woman was the very same lady I knew as the old can collector. Surprised, Adele's smile was brimming with excitement, as though her prank had gone perfectly. "Wait, what? I'm sorry for startling you. Please, have a seat." The man gestured to the seat across from them, and I took it, still stunned. No matter how many times I looked, it was her, the same old woman. "Let me formally introduce myself. My name is Adele, and I'm the chairwoman of the Wellington Group. My name is John, her son, and I serve as the company president." I still couldn't find words. Chairwoman. This can-collecting old lady was actually the head of a famous company. "Thank you so much for helping my mother. I apologize for the delay in expressing our gratitude." The president bowed his head politely, but I still couldn't believe it. Thinking that I had to say something, I voiced the thing that had been bothering me the most. "Why, collecting cans." The chairwoman laughed heartily. "Right. It does seem strange, doesn't it? You see, after the war, during the chaotic times, I was raising 3 children on my own. Collecting cans gave me just enough to start a little shop, and that grew into the business we have now. So collecting cans, for me, it's a part of my life. I won't give it up, not until I die. No matter what we say, she won't stop. And it's been a bit of a challenge for us. I'm sorry if it caused any trouble for you, Sean. Oh, because of that, I got the chance to meet you. I owe everything to those cans." The chairwoman laughed again. Finally, I was beginning to understand the situation. She told me that buying my painting had been a complete coincidence. She began to explain. Apparently, she'd gone to the art exhibition specifically to see my work. However, since she didn't know my name, she had no idea which one was mine. As she was looking around, trying to guess which piece was mine, one painting caught her eye and wouldn't let go. Pointing to my painting on the table, she asked, "Isn't this me?" Well, yes, it could be you." "What do you mean could be?" "I thought it was me at first sight." Well, I was actually thinking of the late grandmother Anne as I started painting it, but halfway through, it started to resemble you so closely. I guess it really is your portrait. See, the moment I saw it, my heart skipped a beat. I was desperate to have it, and did a lot of research. And when I found out it was by Sean, I was just thrilled. She brought her hands together in a burst of excitement. "It's the first time I've seen such a wonderful painting. And to think it was painted by you, really." I'm overjoyed. Thank you. Then I remembered that painting had been purchased for $100K. I appreciate the kind words, but $100K is too much. I can't accept it. It's well-deserved compensation. Take it and go abroad. The words came out of nowhere. Sean, you have talent. The $100K. Consider it my investment in the future. Use it to learn more. Come back as a true artist. With a determined look, she softened back into her familiar, warm smile. I like to think I have an eye for people. You're going to be an extraordinary artist. We will always be here to support you. She extended her right hand. I'll be here, picking up cans, and waiting until you return. I gently took her hand, feeling the warmth in her touch. I realized that this wasn't a dream. After graduating, I headed to France. With gratitude for the two grandmothers I cherished, I boarded the plane, determined to return one day as a true artist.